and we will start. But I just want to have a couple brief comments. First of all, we found out that a lot of people that wanted to attend this webinar had conflicts, either work or vacation, but they will be watching the recordings. And John will post that quite soon. Also, if you are on the computer or your phone, please mute your line so we don't have a lot of feedback like we've had in certain other past sessions. And now I would like to introduce Roz Kama, and I'm really looking forward to this. And before we get into you, Roz, I also want to mention everybody else. We had a couple changes. Dr. Joan Roberts was going to talk in January. Her schedule, it's better, she will be speaking in February. And Steve Paoloni from Telolumen will be talking in January. And then lastly, I want to let you know that DOE Caliper is going to include a caliper round for testing tunable dimming and Kelvin changing LED products in 2013, which I'm pretty excited upon. I'm also on the Caliper Guidance Committee. So now it's all yours, Roz. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Dan. Hello all, and I'll just apologize that I have a head cold, and I hope that I'll get through this hour without being disruptive with a cough. I gave this talk about 1.5 years ago to Light Fair, and Stan asked if I would come back and revisit this topic with you all. For those of you who don't know me, I am an interior designer. I have a healthcare planning and design firm in New Haven, Connecticut. We're about to celebrate our 30th anniversary and have been doing work primarily in acute care. But mostly I think I'm known for my work in evidence-based design. And so I took the opportunity when I was asked to make this presentation to Light Fair to not claim to be an expert, but rather to do what we all do best in our evidence-based work, and that is to just do a search of the literature and use our best possible examples to start a conversation with those of you who are out in the field and looking at the way we light our interiors. So I call this presentation Places of Well-Being because I think in the end, whether you're ill or you're well, that what we're looking for are interior environments that support our wholeness as human beings. And the question at hand is, how does light influence our healing when we're taken off our perfect balance? For those of you who aren't familiar with the evidence-based process, it's not as new as I think some of us have been pushing it, but it is about using bona fide research projects to look at, credible evidence that connect the design of the built environment to outcomes. And so how we use it to start the conversation with clients and or fellow colleagues on the design team. I think as lighting designers and certainly as interior designers, we don't always get invited to the table early enough on, but making the point that the work that you all are doing is very important for the health and well-being of those who occupy interior spaces. And so if we start with a baseline of knowledge, then we start the conversation at the right level, as opposed to generally starting with an understanding that, it's just an electrical engineering solution, and why spend all that money on those fixtures? We can do it for less. So talking more about the outcome as opposed to just expensive fixture. one of the things that I write about in the book that I wrote is that it isn't just the literature in each and every.
No, it's all right.
I'm sorry? Can you hear me? I'm going to assume you can all
Yes,
hear
we
me.
can hear you, Rosa. We can hear you fine.
Oh, all right. Okay.
I think somebody's microphone was connected for a second.
Okay. All right. That's fine. So this idea that each and every project has the opportunity to be a great project, regardless of budget. It doesn't always have to be a conversation around pricing, but that you have to start with an enlightened client and start with their institutional intelligence, you know, their strategic objectives for starting a renovation project or a major building project. To some degree, particularly in healthcare, we will make time in the project to sit and talk to either users or patients and their families. And as you begin to mesh those two conversations together, some of the major outcomes that need to be addressed become apparent. And if you feel that you don't have enough information to move that conversation to that level, then bring in thought leaders. There are plenty available in the field who can address, and particularly now in healthcare with a lot of emphasis being on patient satisfaction, and for those of you who are aware of what the Accountable Care Act will do and HCAP scores, an awful lot is going to ride on certain environmental evaluations from the patient perspective. Once you get through all of that analysis, then that's about the time when you take a look at what's in the research and see where you can support at least some of the requests and conversations that have come along, and then, you know, park your ego and show what, you know, others have done, and keep the conversation not slipping below that baseline of knowledge. And then depending on the willingness of the project or the client, it's there that you can start to introduce some innovative ideas or new products or new concepts and how one might light the space, particularly as you all are beginning to start to take a look at what LED lighting is going to offer to us and our ability to create different environments. So this ability to add new design intelligence to this conversation, in the end, you know, pulling all this together and summarizing comes to what I refer to as project wisdom, which is a little different in each case. And then and only then letting the client get to this idea that they can, in fact, draw a project vision from that. Otherwise, you know, we all hear the same requests over and over again. So it's creating this unique and customized way of having an evidence-based conversation. What I'm going to do now, as I sort of take you through some of the baseline understanding about lighting and the built environment, is I'm going to couch this conversation in outcomes. And at the bottom of the screen, if you follow along with me, you'll see pain, sleep, depression, length of stay, communication, and satisfaction levels. In this section that I'm going to specifically on patient-centered is a very important conversation when designing acute care environments. So when we start with pain management, I think there's a fair amount of research that begins to make the correlation between exposure to natural light and the reduction of pain and the use of pain medications. And the other thing I think is important to say is, you know, follow the money. And when pain's reduced, and fewer pain meds are used, generally there's a reduced length of stay, and that impacts hospital costs in getting a patient to recovery and ultimately to discharge. So how we bring light and natural light, or, you know, the combination of artificial light with natural light, creating that same rhythm, becomes very important in pain management. What the researchers will tell you is that sunlight exposure will increase levels of serotonin and a neurotransmitter that inhibits pain pathways. So it's actually a physiological response, and begins to at least help for those in planning how and where to place certain services at exterior window walls, and in some cases you'll see a little later on, in particular, exposures to the sun. So when we look specifically at the shady side of the building versus the sunny side of the building, this effect of sunlight starts to look quite specifically at particular populations. And in a particular study, at the end of this, I have all the citations. I think you're going to post this presentation, but all the citations and all the studies are noted at the end. So looking at a group of patients recovering from spinal surgery, that what we find is that 46% greater intensity in sunlight begins to, I was clicking away here too soon, creates 22% less pain meds, and shows, back to this follow the money, 21% reduction in medication costs. So you begin to see that this conversation about lighting not only has an impact on a patient and their satisfaction with their care, but also from the administrative side, a cost correlation. There's also a distraction theory in the design of environments, in that if you can create positive distractions, then less attention is directed towards the patient's pain. So in this particular case, this is a children's hospital in El Paso, Texas, where we worked with Nurture by Steelcase, a furniture line, and they allowed us to create this customized soffit detail, creating the representation of the big Texas sky with stars, but for children, a wonderful positive distraction theory. So the idea that light in a decorative way can also contribute to the same outcome. Phillips has been just remarkable in not only understanding the power of this distraction theory in moving through the efficiency of some diagnostic and treatments that are a bit ominous because of the size of the equipment, but it also has been shown to keep these patients less anxious and able to cooperate with their particular treatment or care plan. We don't talk enough about how the built environment impacts caregivers. We have focused a great deal on patients and their needs, but as we sort of move into this understanding of how light impacts sleep, we can't help but also talk about staff. So we find that light exposure throughout the day, especially in the buildings that we design today that are much larger, and many staff are drawn to their work environments in the interior of buildings. We're starting to find that more owners are allowing us to create staff respite and replenishment areas closer to daylight. And once they have more access to daylight, we find that there is a deeper sleep at night, which makes them less likely to commit error in their task work on their next shift. And so daylighting becomes important not only for the patient but also for staff. And preaching to the choir here, but circadian rhythms also play a role in how our hormones respond and create a very different sense of orientation when you're ill and housed in an institution that might have lights on all the time, or that maybe you're in a room with a window looking out towards a brick wall and not really clear. Knowing that the circadian rhythm is important to who we are and how our bodies function becomes important. Those of us who travel a great deal know what it means for jet lag. Arriving many hours later, your body should be sleeping, but if it's sunny in your arrival zone, you're clearly energized and ready to go at a different pace. There's also the idea that natural lighting can be augmented. And so having limited natural light on a north-facing room versus adding more bright light to an artificial room can, help create that simulated daylight. So, the importance of the skills that you all bring to the table becomes very important. And we find that patients equally, as humans, we're all going to feel better if we have this exposure to this sense of our circadian rhythm. And so whether we do it with a large window in the room or we do it augmented by artificial lighting, the net result is the same, and sleep is clearly an important part of the recovery. Newborn intensive care units are very important for creating rhythm and cycles, and have been shown to have a direct effect on weight gain. And so it becomes very important to think about how lighting works, equally with sound, but light is a very important sensory perception needed for a newborn. And the idea of using cycled light versus constant light also becomes that much more important for getting a newborn to gain weight and be able to create the rhythms and patterns of normal life so that they can be discharged and sent home. Light pollution, is something that I think the sustainable movement has added to our conversation. But hospitals as a whole are fairly lit environments, and to begin to think about, is that necessary, and can we create sort of a different understanding about light levels that are needed when patients should be sleeping. And so how can we optimize light levels around a conversation for sleep in the acute care market, which would be very different than we would have in other design sectors. And then similarly asking the question, should corridor lighting be dimmed? And although we have to allow lighting to provide the services and reduce visual error for those working the night shifts, there is an importance to understanding the need for patients, but also simultaneously understanding what light does to night shift workers. And so that night shift, the understanding that we're trying to, I think, get to in most of our planning conversations is about where is the on-stage and where is the off-stage work done. And so on-stage, it becomes clearly about the patient, but that there are other areas in adjacent where light levels can be higher and where staff collaboration will occur. So, so having an understanding of how lighting levels plays a role in the way we plan these environments and segregate those who might have a responsibility to, or those who might have the need for a little bit more darkness for sleep versus those who are working, becomes a very delicate balance, and yet allowing appropriate light when caregivers are in the on-stage mode. This is a view of a patient room that was done at the new replacement hospital, the University Medical Center at Princeton in Plainsboro. And the chief nursing officer spent an awful lot of time with some other researchers to look at how certain outcomes could be improved in this particular environment. One of the things that came out of this idea of creating a like-handed room where the bathroom is on the head wall where one could reduce falls was the ability to get a patient out of the bed and to the bathroom is behind that sliding door to allow the patient to help self-navigate either on their own or to have a call button to get assistance. But what most of the research has found is that patients will attempt to navigate on their own and in the process will go down and have a nasty fall. And so this idea of putting the bathroom on the head wall, but someone came up with the idea of putting a handrail from the head of the bed to that barn door configuration and linked it. So as they got up, the patient would put their hand on that handrail, it would trigger a sensor, and a light would go on so that they could see their way to the bathroom without having a light on all night long in the room. And so this idea that there's intelligence built into some objects that will turn lights on when you need them, I think is a brilliant solution for this particular outcome. Clearly, light plays a role in depression, and so this idea of the role that sunlight plays can be as effective in antidepressant drugs and sometimes even faster acting. And so there have been plenty who have studied that light treatment can have an effective onset in 2 weeks as opposed to antidepressants, which may take 4 to 6 weeks. So it begins to add a bit of a different conversation, particularly in facilities that house patients that are more susceptible to depression. I think we've known that for years, especially those of us who live in northern climates or those that sort of fall from the tundra effect in winter. The snowbirds have proven that. And so there have been others who now make the case that if in some colder climates where the days are greater, that the actual length of stay is longer, particularly in winter and fall, and that those in warmer climates recuperating from the same surgeries or the same illnesses will actually be discharged that much sooner. So you begin to see how this conversation for lighting begins to play into not only a clinical conversation, but also the financial cost savings for how quickly patient rooms will turn and patients will be discharged. So in the northern climates, one would ask, then how do we create that full cycle of light that simulates the warm climate or the sunnier, brighter day? Canadian hospitals will find, or at least studies were done across a variety of areas in Canada, this idea of looking at depression found that the sunnier rooms showed a shorter day of 2.6 days, which is quite significant. And another study in an Italian hospital looking at depression on east versus west-sided rooms, the east side, which attributes to morning sun, which plays a huge role not only for patients with depression, but also with the elderly. And in this study, showed that they were discharged 3.7 days faster. And then looking at a cardiac intensive care study on the concept of sunny versus shady rooms, that the sunny rooms actually showed lower mortality rates. So armed with this information, you begin to have a very different conversation in building the case for the type of lighting that you're trying to create. Communication is actually becoming more and more important as we get into the Accountable Care Act and taking a look at patient satisfiers. There will be much more measurement, many more questionnaires about conversations. And there is a study that actually finds that people feel more comfortable talking and talking longer in rooms that have more intimate lighting as opposed to brightly, evenly lit rooms. And so knowing where and when and how those consultations occur becomes important then in improving communications. And overall, just access to daylight seems to impact patient satisfactions, and hospitals live, frankly, for these scores, and so they watch them and look at them quite carefully. So know that lighting does have an important impact on how users respond to their particular spaces and rate their satisfaction levels. There have been studies that talk about one's understanding of the attention to the appointments in a room, and this was a study that was actually done in New York City in preparation for the Weill Cornell building, and researchers out of Cornell found that if the room looked like someone cared about it and had good interior design qualities, that not only did perception of care go up, but perception of wait times went down. And so the ability to marry good lighting with good design becomes very important in these perceived evaluations. Light and shadow and wayfinding. People make cognitive maps about how they move through spaces, and so we'll rely on windows. You'll find that many hospitals now, understanding those evidence-based designers working on these projects, understanding a little bit more about this, will light the end of a corridor with a window and not just put an office in front of it and block off the light from the corridor. So the idea of walking towards light, walking towards daylight, particularly on patient floors where staff have a sense, again, acknowledging circadian clues begins to be quite important. And then thinking about wayfinding and how you light paths, and as you get deeper into these buildings, maybe daylight isn't available. So, in this case, Cancer Hospital in New Haven, using an onyx bulb that's lit, or using light to accentuate becomes rather important. A 600-bed hospital was measured and found that interruptions to staff and helping their way, helping those who were lost, actually incurred a cost of about $222,000. So helping folks self-navigate actually also has a cost savings. So knowing the role that lighting plays in wayfinding becomes equally as important. And then this idea of comfort and control, and again, back to this distraction idea, I think, Philips, again, just seems to be capitalizing on it, and they're not inexpensive solutions, but they seem to be funded because they do make a difference. And so reducing stress and fear and anxiety, certainly keeps the MRI humming at the scale and the pace that it should be by taking a few minutes and using light projection in this case to settle down a young patient. And so in it improves performance. So let me just switch gears a bit and talk a little bit more about how light plays a role in supporting staff activities, and again, looking at the outcomes related to medical errors and stress and satisfaction. So the idea of bringing resources to the caregivers, we found clearly in a lot of the work that's been done with time and motion studies and watching nurses, they spend more time fetching than nursing. And so the trend has been to move many of these resources closer in this particular instance. This is a project in Ohio where it's quite gray most of the time. And so 13 courtyards were created to bring light deeper into the building. In these nursing units, a light well is drawn in. But you can see also using the Pixis unit and accent lighting to create a bit of a sense of a pleasant work environment, but also, accentuating some of the critical tasks of medication dispensing, and reducing error becomes an important topic that you all must address. And similarly, in clinical labs, and understanding appropriate light levels and reflectivity on our part of the surfaces we select begin to help reduce some of those errors, and particularly areas where there's visual inspection and paying attention to light levels. I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but be reminded that you need to have these conversations over and over again with those that we serve, be it the design team or be it the users and the administrators. And so looking at where error rates occur, errors become a very important topic in acute care, and understanding that as these light levels increase, that errors go down. And so be armed and be aware of what those statistics are. Job satisfaction begins to be an important topic, because recruiting, but more importantly, retaining appropriate staff becomes very important. So job satisfaction, and looking at surveys that staff fill out. This is a clinical laboratory building that we did, and we did some preliminary studies with staff, and they wanted access to outdoors. If they couldn't get access to outdoors, then they wanted access to staff retreat or break areas that had daylight or nature connected to it. And so in the photo in the upper left-hand corner is showing a basement level workspace where a courtyard was dug in so that the light from the lobby spilled down into the light well. Not the most ideal, but nonetheless a sense of what was happening with the day through just a glance over towards this light well became very important. Working with some of our more enlightened patient clients, they make a point to say, let's grab some of that perimeter work area and not just leave it just for patients, but let's create staff areas that have access to natural lighting. And this is the project that added all these additional courtyards, and they allowed us to move staff work zones and staff break areas to these perimeter areas to create that level of job satisfaction. And so someone came along and measured and said 3 hours of daylight during a shift really makes a difference in the way employees will rate their job level satisfaction. So it becomes important at that level. And if you compare that to what it costs to replace a nurse, the investment, if you make the return investment important and look at it over the life cycle of the fixture that you're installing or the type of lighting system you're installing, it goes a long way to earn back that $62,000 that it takes to replace just one nurse. So this idea of looking at planning and understanding not only how the artificial light works, but that light can't just be at the perimeters, but can also be integrated into the floor plan through light wells and bridges. This particular nursing unit has, in the lower right-hand corner, has a bridge with glass on either side, so you come across a very well-lit corridor as you enter into the unit. So it's sort of a bit of an attitude adjustment. One of the things, a little hard to do over the phone, but I often ask people to think about the kinds of environments that, after you've had a stressful day at work, if you could go anywhere, where would you go? And think about the elements of those environments. And then I ask a very simple question in my audience, and that is, were you indoors or were you outdoors? And although I'm not a researcher, I think I've done this enough times to know that we as human beings would prefer to be outdoors than indoors. And so we find that we spend 90% of our time indoors, and yet, we have little understanding of how to, or we do have the understanding, but we have little opportunity to bring some of those qualities of outdoors into our built environment. In 1984, Roger Ulrich, who is just retired from Texas A&M in the School of Architecture, has been a strong proponent of doing research in the field, and went into Philadelphia to look at a number of patients recovering from gallbladder surgery at a time when they were hospitalized, and half the patients had a view of a brick wall and the other of a stand of trees. And what they found was that the majority of patients who had the view of the trees used less pain medication and, in fact, were discharged sooner. So that's where that initial study came from. And when he pushed it further, he began to try to understand what you did to those rooms with a brick wall, and they found if you added you added art that had the same view of nature, that the same results could be achieved. So there are others. There are a number of neuroscientists who are beginning to try to understand physiologically what is happening, neurologically what's happening. And so looking at neural activity, when you just look at an environment that's really devoid of much detail or light, and they'll begin to see activity change from the similar activity that they see in the brain when we're looking at a vibrant nature scene or exposed in nature. And so this idea that we can attribute it to endorphins that are associated with pleasure centers and actually be linked to our immune systems plays in a very important role in the work we're doing. I had a wonderful group of neurological patients who I sort of tested with this little exercise, and one gentleman acknowledged that he wasn't outdoors, he was indoors, but he was in his living room looking out the window, and I asked what he was looking at, and he said, I'm looking at a tree. And I said, well, what do you see? And he said, I see 7 shades of green, which was a very normal response for a neurological patient. But I'm thinking, how brilliant is he that we don't see that, and that's what we need to understand, that in nature and in the views that we love so much actually have refracted light. and any particular surface will have a variety of shades of a particular color, and we need to learn how to use that knowledge in developing not only the light source but also the textures and colors that we use in our interiors. And so can artificial lighting help us mimic some of these wonderful natural environments that have such a benefit to us when we are infirm, but one could argue even when we're well. And so I pose that question to you all. So I'm going to stop talking at this point. I do have some resources for you. I have authored a book on the process of evidence-based healthcare design, which really is just a way to help you navigate through your design process, regardless of your discipline. I think it's fairly self-explanatory on how to bring your clients and or their users along to a better side of this conversation. If you don't know the Center for Health Design, www.healthdesign.org has a number of white papers and continues to add to that bank of knowledge. There have been 3 now, and I believe a 4th will begin analysis of all the literature linked to acute and, well, health care. We're looking at ambulatory and long-term care as well. Will help you at least find some of the pretty basic studies that can at least get you started. And in any of these cases, always look in their bibliographies and see where they've gathered information. And after a while, you become a fairly decent student. But if not, reach out to the center, and the center has a number of ways to help you access the appropriate information you're looking for. So go to their website and take a look. There is a Ripple database that has been developed, which allows you to sort information a number of different ways and allow you to compare certain studies. So we have a rather deep bench now of researchers on staff, tied to many other academic researchers and researchers who are employed by architectural design firms or from manufacturers. And so this body of knowledge is growing. We'd love to have any and as many of you participate in this conversation, particularly around lighting. I think it hasn't gotten the due that it needs, which is what forced me, I think, to just scratch the surface. There are a number of facilities each year that participate in a field study research project called the Pebble Project. Hospitals, clinics, long-term care facilities that are committed to designing and will look at these particular outcomes and use the baseline to help them innovate in certain areas, and then they are committed to measuring and sharing, for better or for worse, what they learned from this process. So it is just a remarkable way to stay connected on current trends, but also it gives you some clues as to what those who are building are interested in, what their top of mind topics are. There's also something called the Built Environment Network. For those of you linked more to facilities, we're creating smaller network groups through the Center for Health Design to look quite specifically. Many of those folks are looking more at operational and maintenance issues, but lighting becomes a very important topic in that regard. And then just sort of at the end of this is the idea of accreditation. And so like LEED, a few years ago, several on our board thought that it would be important to create this certification program that would be available not just to designers but also to those who administer projects. And so it's called EDAC, Design Accreditation and Certification. And right now, accrediting individuals. At some point, there may be certification for buildings, but not at the moment. So as promised at the end of this PowerPoint are the studies that I referred to linked to the slides, so feel free to look these up and read more than I could possibly deliver in this period of time. I'm sure they'll appeal to you at a very technical level, a little different than maybe what I was grasping at, but I certainly hope that I've at least piqued your interest and welcome the opportunity to just take some questions now. So, John, should I just turn this over?
Well, hold on, Roz. I will take care. First of all, thank you very, very much. That was excellent. Plus, your presentation was amazing with the slide backgrounds and stuff. So I'm going to ask questions that people wrote down in the chat room. And some of the questions were asked before you got to some of the answers. One question was clinical trials. This information arrived from, but then you basically listed where all of your documentation came from, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have another one is any studies, anecdotal evidence on occupancy triggered lighting of halls, corridors, and parking, just-in-time light by light sequencing versus anticipatory lighting up the area. Is that understandable, Roz?
I think so. I'm not, I excuse me, I'm not sure I've done a conclusive search. So here's my comment to that, and I'm just the wrong technical person to ask with that regard. But if there are studies that would be useful, you all know where the objections are, where the roadblocks are, where you get stuck with getting to the right place. And if we need to, and this is where the relationship with the center or with any other research group, I mean, that you all are a perfect group to create a research agenda and say that, it might be important to say over the next few years that you're going to look at three big topics. And if you want to introduce some of those topics to these Pebble projects and see if, in fact, they're looking at these issues, I think we can start a conversation there. And if you think that there are topics because of new light sources that we just haven't explored, or new technologies that might give us an opportunity to circumvent some older issues, I think the point is that we need the baseline information, and the way to do that is find your academic partners, find those who are undergoing projects who are willing to go ahead and measure based on some of your hypotheses. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I don't know specifically about studies that looked at the
Thank you. And then, Perry, you wrote a second question that seemed to be almost duplicate. If it is different, you can even do it verbally, but I think she pretty much covered that. Okay. Okay, in rooms with windows, or perhaps in interior windowless rooms, do you see an advantage of Kelvin color adjusting lighting that is controlled automatically to match the Kelvin color of natural daylight outside the building? This would relate to potentially helping mimic light conditions for the best circadian rhythms.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what the study was saying. You can go back and, we keyed the studies to the slides. So if you go back and look at where I mentioned that and read the study, I mean, I think that's, essentially what we gleaned from. If you can't have a sunny window, I mean, not everyone can be on the morning side of the or the southern side of the building, then the way to compensate for that is to do so with artificial lighting, and to understand whether you do it with light controls or you do it with the source of light and the right temperatures, and create a similar effect, then the net result seems to be the same.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna try to get, okay, I keep getting ones more at the end and it changes guess that staff preferred for areas of retreat in this sequence of priority. A, access to nature, natural viewscapes with plants and landscape. B, access to dynamic natural light with without viewscape. And C, daylight quality artificial lighting. Does that priority sound good to you, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, so we've got two problems with clinical staff. Number one, they don't take breaks, right? So we have a problem that they miss their lunch, they miss their break. When they take that 10-minute replenishment break, we find they do best when they have access to natural light, absolutely. But if they can't get to it, then whatever can. You can't send them into the interior of a building with, the typical break room that has, a 2x4 fluorescent light. And, I mean, the rest of my storyline is last summer softball schedule still pinned to the bulletin board, and somebody left a cracker with peanut butter on it from this morning and think that that's going to, send them back after 10 minutes back into the ED and be at the top of their game. We're human beings and we wear down. And so, lighting is one piece of it. You got to give them a comfortable chair. Frankly, you got to give them a cell phone so they can call home and see what's going on with their kids or, whatever is going on in their life. But when they can step outdoors, when they can see out a window, when they have that long view of nature, all of the studies say that whether you're well or sick, it's what gives you that jolt of energy again. So yeah, I would agree with that's the priority level. But clearly, there are planning issues that are tied into it, and sometimes the lighting designer doesn't have a say in that. So you got to compensate for where it was missed. But then you got to fight your way through the value engineering, and the way to do it is based on these outcomes.
Thank you. Okay, I just want to let everybody, we've had a ton of questions and we're not going to be able to handle them all in this session. But Roz, would it be okay if people emailed you questions that we cannot get to in this session?
Sure. And, I'll just qualify it by saying I'm not a lighting designer, so don't ask me really technical questions. My best advice is, start reading these studies. You'll be, it's amazing how empowered you become, and then how much more convincing you are in front of clients to, take lighting. I mean, we desperately need you all to be doing, your best work, because it does have an impact on the way people spend 90% of their time. So feel free to email me. I can certainly try to find the sources, or certainly, happy to join the group again, Stan.
Okay, thank you. So, question, to realize the health benefits and for them to be achieved, it helps to have substantial financial component for these interconnected savings. So in regards to the 21% savings for pain medication, was that a blended study using high SADS area like Seattle and sunny places like Florida? And if so, is the industry targeting SAD places for better financial metrics and more pronounced savings?
I don't recall offhand. I'm sorry, I didn't go back and reread these after I initially gave these.
That's okay. John can just email you that if that's going to be easier for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a short one. This is even okay. In your work, are you doing mainly new construction, remodels, and retrofits? And how do you see that those three types of projects sort of compare with each other to get approval and funding, et cetera?
Well, we've just come off a big boom of new construction, and I think with the new Accountable Care Act coming in and uncertainty about reimbursement, that a lot of new construction has been put on hold. That's not to say that there isn't any, but our big days of replacement facilities, I think, are going to slow down for a while. But healthcare is healthcare, and there's always something that needs to be renovated or retrofitted because of a piece of equipment or a new policy or care practice model. And so I think we'll see more renovation work going on, but unlike the period that we've just been through, I think the smarter we all are as consultants bringing this information to the table, this conversation about outcomes is going to be extremely important. Reimbursement structures are going to be tied to this, and the ability to do more for less is a very big part of this conversation. That doesn't mean spending less money up front, but understanding that if it costs you a little bit more, you better be able to justify the return on the investment over the life cycle of the product or the system that you're proposing. And I think once you do that and can cite it with some of these studies, or at least hold them at a baseline, because more than likely you're going to want to innovate with some new systems and new topics, work on your industry to do the research, find those who are likely to sponsor the field study research, get more current statistics, and watch how it impacts some of these issues that the government is going to be measuring and going to hold hospitals and other facilities accountable for. So, understand why this conversation is happening at the C-suite level and make it work for you and your design solutions.
Thank you. And this might be the last question. And this might be out of your expertise, but what do you think about like intermittent light showers with cool 5,000 Kelvin, maybe for 10, 15-minute increments during the work shift for both day shift and night shift, like for staff, like nurses, Ross?
Yeah, I think, I look at how we light most buildings, and I think, have we not come forward with new technology to be able to do exactly what you just described? And no one's going to approve that unless they understand what the outcome is going to be. So if you can tie that to a very specific outcome that, I'm sorry to say, but you can link to a financial benefit, then I think we can have more fun with these kinds of systems.
Well, thank you. We are at the top of the hour. Again, I think you did great with your cold or flu.
Thank you. So, a nasally voice, but I was able to breathe, so that was good. Yesterday would have been harder.
Yes, and other people, again, if your question did not get handled, please email Roz. Her email address is right on the slide. It's also in the committee roster. And I do have one question before Roz, before we leave. Now, with this presentation as a recording, would that be okay just to have just for the committee members who could not attend today, or would this be okay for everybody that might want to watch it available on the Human Centric Lighting website?
Sure. I mean, I don't see any, there's nothing proprietary here. It's just my interpretation of the research. So that's fine.
Okay, then John will put it available for everybody on the website.
And you'll send me, would you just send me that link?
Oh yeah, definitely. We'll do that. Yes.
Okay, cool.
So we are finished, and thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.